Hello, hello, test. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Rich Scheibner. Hope you're all doing well. Just going to crank down this audio just a little bit. Because, yeah, I think it's playing in the background, but I'm not quite sure. Who knows? I think, yeah, we've got it going on there. So, welcome back with you. We are doing something fun today. I'm super excited to do this. Today, we are talking about writing in VR. So, what does that mean? Writing as an virtual reality. I'm here at my home space, actually, just doing the work from there today because one of the things we'll talk about for today's stream is some of the opportunities and challenges that come up with actually setting up and trying to write in VR. It can be a little challenging, I'm not going to lie. And that's something that a colleague and I, and as well as actually two colleagues and I, have two researchers and I have been kind of thinking about pretty critically in terms of what's afforded to us when we write in VR and what those experiences may welcome and sort of create in terms of problems and things like that. So lots of stuff to say to you all. Very delighted to be getting into this talk. Before we get started, just want to say a couple quick words about the Writing Center and a couple acknowledgments. As is tradition here on the stream, I always want to thank Dr. John Suffren and the team at the Writing Center and the Writing Department for supporting this stream for another season. We are just about near the end of this one. So we've got a couple left. We have one on March 22nd, March 29th, and April 5th. And that is it, folks, for this season. So again, big thanks to them, especially Dr. John Suffren as the Writing Center Director for helping seed the idea and supporting it. Without the support of the staff as well as the faculty here in the Writing Department, this project would not exist. And thanks to all the special guests as well as students and anyone in public who's been joining the stream too. You've really made it worthwhile. If you are interested in doing more things with the Writing Center, I always call attention to a couple things we have going on. We have affiliations with the ESL English as a Second Language Open Learning Center, the Multimedia Language Center. We have one-on-one appointments. We have an accessibility specialist, and we also have drop-in sessions. In fact, there have been some Writing Center pop-up sessions in Central Square on campus. And so I encourage you to look at all those different opportunities because they're free. We also have workshops that are as free as well. So tomorrow, actually, I'm giving my talk on research methods. If you're interested in learning a bit of ways to support your research with primary and secondary sources, come check it out. It's free on Zoom. You can keep your camera on, off. You can bring things that we want to workshop, or we can workshop ideas that I'm bringing to you. So I'm really excited to do that, and thanks to James Robertson for helping promote that. And we have a special guest also planned for additional streams and things like that, and workshops. A lot of different things to consider that I encourage folks to expand. But what I mean is expand their view beyond doing kind of just database research, right? That's really interesting, but I'm going to sort of in this workshop get folks to think about a little differently about, what sort of methods mean, what archival research and what primary research means. So we have all those opportunities, things that are coming up as part of the Writing Center. Check those out. Again, always free. And then these videos are always on demand, and you've got links below to other ones that are coming up. And so, as I mentioned, after this, we have one on the 22nd, 29th, and 5th, each of which have special guests. That's been a big emphasis for me this term, has been working with special guests, bringing them on to enhance these kind of conversations. All right, so that's a little bit of a preamble. In a little bit, we are going to be talking with a special guest, Stefan Blacha, who is an undergraduate in psychology with the Faculty of Health at York U. And Stefan has also been a research assistant with myself and Dr. Beth Caravella on a project about writing in VR. We've been doing that for a number of months. We've recorded more than 40 hours, I would say, of content. And so we're kind of drafting that article right now, but we thought this might be a good place to pause and just sort of speak a bit publicly about what the experiences have been like, mostly just from setting up and using VR. It's really complicated sometimes to do that, and I think there are more accessible means to getting into virtual space now that I would encourage folks to consider But still, I mean, as we're going to talk about today, there are like, some different hangups and things like that that come along with writing. I sound very negative today. I don't know why. Maybe it's that kind of time change and messing with sleep and all that kind of stuff. But I promise it's not an entirely negative enterprise. It is really, really cool. All right, so a couple things to mention before we do that as well. I've already talked about what's coming up for us, but let's just talk about some of the practical things that you might want to consider if you want to get into this space before you can even pick a application or anything like that. There are a variety of headsets sort of out there in VR space that you might want to consider if you're interested, or you might want to turning to a library or the one on campus that we have, or even another sort of rental space. There's a lot of ways to get your hands on these things without having to buy them outright. So I'm privileged to have that opportunity for research to pick up VR kits and kind of test and stuff like that. And that's also just a big acknowledgement to the university for supporting, experimentation and stuff like that. It's all part of the invention process in writing. So what I'm looking at here on the screen is a piece of equipment called the HTC Vive. So I'm going to go ahead and mute this because I think the YouTube overlords probably won't like that I'm showing this kind of stuff, but it's mostly for educational purposes. So this is it's a good indication of what VR often looks like, when you're getting the kits. It's some configuration like this. You've got the headset right here. In my case, I've got a Vive Pro 2, so that's why I'm showing this one. You have at least two trackers that map the rooms. So you can't see because I can't really point my camera at the moment, but above me I have these things, and then right behind me, like on my camera, sort of, I guess, to the top, left of my head, I guess, if you're looking at it, there's on a bookshelf, there's another tracker up there. And so these things actually map the entire room with sensors and, help you kind of get situated in a virtual space that, the machine is trying to render for you. And then you have controllers. So it's usually like in both hands. You're going to be using that. I mean, I've got one right here that I'll be picking up in just a bit, and that's what we're working with. So what do you notice about that right away? You might notice that we don't write that often like this, right? By clicking. It's not meant to do that, so to say. And we'll get into that in a minute of how we've kind of had to maneuver around some of those challenges. But, doing painting and doing kind of handwriting, yes, you can get close to that. But, we're not holding the equipment like this and sort of drawing. I've even tried to do that to see what that was like. And maybe I'll try it again today for the purposes of the stream. But, for the most part, you're clicking and dragging, and you're even using these controllers to move around in virtual space. So if you are stationary, for one reason or another, you can still move around. And I think for writing, we don't do a lot of standing and moving anyways, I guess with our in terms of our feet and things like that. But that is possible when you're working and writing in VR. Okay, so that's one of the things. And if you look through this clip, they show you how to set everything up. You want to make sure it's pointing down into your space at about a 25 to 35 degree angle, just enough to see the entire space so that it doesn't glitch or do something else. And you've got a number of like connector kits and so forth that come along with it. You're going to pair the controllers and so forth. So I would say this is, for anyone doing this the first time, this is probably the hardest part, is to set up your entire equipment and to just get used to all the sort of layers that come along with what the machine needs, which is to map your space, your physical space, into a virtual world and then follow you along and so forth. So for something like this, the unfortunate thing is you need a pretty good computer that is capable of handling VR. And I think a lot of companies and sort of computer companies now are even advertising that you can, a laptop or a desktop is VR ready, because this is what people like to do if they can. They want to know that their machine can power it. So when I was using this a couple years ago, I was boot camping a MacBook and so forth, and it was pretty good, but it crashed a lot. I just don't think at that time it was capable of handling um, the processing power needed for something like this. So that is a concern, but you know, when we worked with Stefan, and we are continuing to work with Stefan, one thing that we were able to do as well is pick up another piece of equipment that may be a bit more accessible, especially trying to test how that might be useful compared to something a bit more robust like the Vive, right? So this is the MetaQuest. It is sponsored by Facebook. Now, what's great is this is much more affordable, I think, for just sort of casual users. And I'd say just like even casual writers who want to put themselves in a new space and want to see what it's like to type, and let's say a landscape of their choosing. So this is quite popular, and I would just say if you compare the price points between the two, this is much cheaper, and it comes with its own sort of let's say unique opportunities and challenges, right? This one is cheaper, but it requires you currently to have a Facebook sign-in. So I no longer have Facebook, so I had to make up a fake one that is private, no one can follow me on, and things like that. So I wasn't too happy about it at that point when I picked this up. But the advantage on the flip side is you don't have to have any kind of hookup for this unless you want to. So the Vive demands that you are connected to a pretty solid computer, I'd say. Whereas this, you can just power it on and it's all baked in. It doesn't need any sensors. It doesn't need anything like that. Technology is so advanced that it can map the room and give you entire games, like pretty awesome games, I'd say, through just the headset. So all the software, everything is baked into it. And the nice thing is you can plug that into a computer later on if you're looking to essentially do more robust work. Actually, I've got a cable too that's connected with that. And so as part of this project, have been working across the HTC Vive. Stefan is using the MetaQuest, and then Dr. Beth Carabella is using the Steam Index. And so far, we've been able to connect in different ways. As well, one thing we're going to talk about today is the kind of platforms you can use once you've got this set up. So depending on your configuration, you might need to think about different platforms that are agreeable or compatible with a headset, or are cross-platform in that whatever device you're on, you could still join the application. So I guess cross compatibility for applications, we might say, is what we're looking for. So one of the things that I've called out, and we've sort of I want to call attention to, not so call out, so to say, is programs like Immersed. What they allow you to do is enter VR space, and even what they're doing now for this one, for example, is letting you sort of have a hybrid view of your collaborative desk or your couch or something, and people walking in. So it's kind of like a mix of augmented reality and VR. The only unfortunate thing is right now this is only compatible with the Quest, and some of the really robust features of it are actually for profit, right? You have to pay for it. So we've got like a couple different barriers that may make some of this inaccessible. Well, once you can kind of configure it to your needs, or you can find out ways to connect. For example, we're going to talk about a program that's absolutely free once you've got the hardware. I think that you're in a good position. So this is what typically it looks like. You can even do interesting things. Like I tried this with my Mac. You can have the sort of machine map your physical keyboard into the virtual world. So you can see here that it's sort of like a both and for programs like this, or applications like this, you can do really interesting stuff like have multiple screens, different like desktops, things like that. I mean, virtually any place you want to sort of set up, you can. There's lots of different options there. So we'll talk about one that's a bit different than that here in just a few minutes, because I need to actually set up the equipment so you can see what it's like. Okay, so I've talked about those two. I didn't talk just yet about this as well. The real exigence for doing this kind of work in VR, it just started honestly from a bit of wonder between myself and Dr. C. By the way, if you want to see our conversation from this season, check out our first chat in fall 2022, where we talked about motivation and goals for completing writing, because we collaborate quite a bit and we hold each other accountable with our own single author projects. Anyways, with this, we did a recent article. We've kind of been trying to build on some of the research we were doing into game development and communications. So let me just scroll up to the top here and see. Recently published an article called "Surveying the Effects of Remote Communication and Collaboration Practices on Game Developers Amid the Pandemic," and that was published in Communication Design Quarterly. As part of this, we learned that a number of practitioners in game development, and we'll just say creatives for the purposes of this chat, felt some social isolation in the sense that they liked working from home and independently. At the same time, they felt like a number of them felt like they couldn't get work done because of the lack of easy collaboration. So for this example, one developer speaking about Final Fantasy 14, that kind of water cooler talk they say of just leaning over someone's desk or looking at their computer is really difficult to do when it's just over Zoom, something like that. You just don't get that. You don't get that feel, that embodied feel, I think, that many folks have been after or interested in. And so we kept hearing that some people were trying to experiment in VR by doing meetings, such as the ones we saw with Immersed, to just replicate that social experience. Let's meet and actually pull up something on the screen in a virtual desk and see what happens. And so, as they say here, they desired easier collaboration, more camaraderie, and much stronger relationships. But still the response was mixed. And so they said it will increase team cohesion and get everyone back on the same page, but it will decrease productivity as more time is spent being social. However, some people are saying they miss the nuances and joy of the workplace. So we don't want to commute in, but we still want to collaborate with people. This kind of tension. And so we've been thinking, like, is VR a way of getting there, of remedying those social losses and maybe some of that real-time collaboration that just doesn't have a good feel, we can kind of say, if we look back at these emotions when we're working in Zoom, something like that. I find it very exhausting to work just in 2D. I mean, VR is as well, and I'll tell you why in a bit, but there's something there's a different energy I get when I'm actually working with my colleagues in VR. Okay, you know what? I have a doorbell. Give me 1 second. I will be right back. All right, folks, I am back. Sorry about the delay. We have a roofing leak at the moment at our house, and then that was fixed, and so we're checking on it. And yeah, that's one of the things you get to it's sort of experience when you're working in the winter and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, big thanks to everybody who's been helping along with that as well. And that's an interesting thing to talk about with VR is the fact that when you are working in these spaces, VR will try to basically sort of shelter you from the world when you're working in it. It's going to try to recreate that so that you feel totally immersed. But this is something that, like, Dr. Beth Calvarella is talking about quite a bit in her new project. Is there's what's called coexistent space. So if you are working in VR, likely you're going to feel embodied things around you that are in the physical world. So your keyboards, pets, interruptions, things like that, all good and well. And yeah, you've got to kind of negotiate both of those, right? Like, unless you were totally isolated, you might be, but like a lot of times you need a big wide open space to even write in that in VR. So a little interesting, a little challenging, definitely to think about. And yeah, it's just all together. So we have worked with that. One last thing I want to mention, and then I'm going to turn in to VR in just a second. So we've got a special guest who's on the line, who's actually in Bigscreen VR now. So I'm going to move into that space. Is if you also don't have these items, but you still want to experiment with them, remember that in Scott Library, which is on campus, we have VR rooms that are open to you. So you can book those, and you can book them for about 30 minutes at a time. I think that's what you can do it up to, I think, probably an hour, but I'll double check on that. You can, essentially just experience what they're offering to you. And if you look at these, what's pretty sweet is they've got an entire wide open space that you can look at. And these are part of the Vive kits, the ones I was mentioning earlier. So you can sample with those. And that's what you essentially need. You need like this wide open space. My space behind me is pretty good for this purpose, but they do it for you. So if you're looking to get an introduction into VR, definitely check out what they've got to offer there. And you can hear a bit more about the VR room and see a bit more about it on the website. I should actually put that in the show notes as well. All right, so I've done a lot of chatting about this. Let's move over to VR. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up. Now, I have to move my microphone and so forth, so it'll take just a second. But the first things first, well, beyond what I've already talked about, setting up things, and all of that, we need things like the space. And also, sometimes I think like just comfy clothes is totally fine, because you're going to be sitting and moving and things like that. Even if you're stationary, sitting there for a long time at your computer desk, especially working from home, comfy clothes most welcome. So you can see I've got my York and some joggers on so that I can move around the room for this purpose. Now this camera will be pointing at it so you can see what it looks like in the physical world, but I'm going to attempt to talk with my collaborator as well on Discord, so we've kind of had to maneuver some of that work for this. All right, so here goes. Let's see. We will do this. So we're going to show the VR view. So the first thing I got to do is set up this mic so that you can hear it. The reason why I want to do this just live is because you get to see what the whole setup's like. I'm even setting this up not quite knowing if it's fully tracked, because sometimes you have to do the entire tracking, right? I can set it up before, But if I leave it, muted and things like that for a while, I might have some challenges. So let's try this. Okay, so right now, looking pretty good in my headset. Let me get that VR view going. Not too loud, but let me know if it is anybody, and we should be GG on the internet. Let's move this over slightly so we can see what it looks like. Oh, okay, we got that pink and blue. Okay, so we can do this. Looks pretty good. We see that it enlarges just a little bit so that everyone can see a little more closely what that looks like. And that should be good to go. Okay. Again, coexistence space. We are trying to do a little bit of this stuff. It's a little challenging. Working from home while trying to do some focus there. This one, how about this one? Oh, so you can see it. And let's go. We're finally good to go. That'll be nice. Two pages everyone trying this. Lots of different things to kind of manage. All right. Looks like I've got that. So let me enter the space, and then we'll talk to Stefan. Okay. All right. see my hands right there. Kind of funny how it looks. All right, now we've got that. Okay, let's get into VR. So, what I have to do a lot of times when I'm doing this is adjust my headset so that I can see everything as well. And what's nice is we can host a room. Only for 2 people. And then I can show the room ID. And QHA877. So that's what I need to tell my collaborator. One second. Yes, piano music, good. Wow. Surprised it's still on. We got that. Okay. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and mute it. All right, so I'll pull this up and grab my keyboard. Okay, now this should be easy. So it looks like that mic is coming through. Pull up Discord.
Hello. Hello?
Stefan,
Yes?
can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, you can. Good. Awesome. My
Oh,
face is right into the couch right now. I don't know what's going on here, but we'll adjust. Because we talk about frictions a lot in this, don't we?
yeah.
Yeah, we like to do the frictions. Okay, so you can see mine's like slightly bugging out a little bit here, but we will manage. We will manage. I'm gonna recenter myself. There we go. And then there's your big screen we got in front of us. Hi, how you doing?
Very
Very
good. How are
good.
you?
How are you?
So we got some little echo. I don't know what that's from.
Uh, if you
If you
have
have
the
the
audio
audio
on,
on,
actually, wait, I can
I
mute
can mute
myself on
myself
big
on big
screen.
screen.
Yeah, if you mute that, that
There we go.
should be solid. I'm gonna check on
So
my
it's cool
end.
that, yeah?
Just something real quick on this to see if I mute this. And can you speak real quick?
Hello.
Excellent. All right, we are good. So yeah, I'm getting that like white flickering. I don't know what that is, but I think if I sit right here, we should be okay. Likes to do that a little bit. That's okay.
I'm glad you can see my screen now because that's something that we've had an issue with
Yeah,
for like, I don't know how long.
absolutely.
Uh,
So all I need to do is recenter myself. And then if we go over to here's the challenge, folks. When you are doing this, sometimes it's hard to see your physical space as well. So I just need to turn my mic here so that those uh, who are in the stream can see what's going on with this thing. Yeah. So,
is it strange seeing yourself on your video, like in third person?
yes, I'm watching myself. Yeah, it's there's many layers to this. But the one point that I'm trying to make for this is there's just a lot you have to do to get this whole thing going,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and I think sometimes it's a good test to see like is it actually worth it to do to do this. um, that's what we wanted to talk about. Okay, so I'm going to turn to you. Hi. We're up close and personal. We've got our hands,
Of course.
things like that. Very interesting. So Stefan, welcome. I want to say a couple words about you,
Hello.
about how awesome you are.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, Stefan Blacha, who is here with me in a virtual space, um, is an undergraduate. He's finishing his thesis and so forth, a major project with the Department of Psychology. And Dr. Beth Caravilla and I hired him this year to work with us as a research assistant, um, kind of tracking what it's like to write in VR and render these experiences. So Stefan also took classes with the writing department, particularly with me in RIT 2004, um, which is digital writing and digital cultures, intermediate digital authoring practicum, which is RIT 3001, and then Dr. C's class, video game rhetoric. So you've been, good friend of the department, I think, with your peers.
Yeah,
And
been around.
I was sad I couldn't get you into 4001. I think that would have been really amazing for you as well. But we've got great projects also with that class, and we were glad to bring you on as a researcher. Yeah.
Also, this is a nice consolation. This internship.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just switch to my other screen real quick. And while we're doing that, do you want to tell everybody just about some of the stuff that you're working on in addition to this kind of project and so forth? Like,
Like
yeah, what's
the video editing of.
yeah, video editing, and you're also working within their lab and things like that.
Hmm.
I'll just keep this up on the screen like this, and then we can actually see it. Yeah. So, what are you doing elsewhere at York? You've got with I know there's a lab that you're working with, but do you want to tell us a bit about that lab?
So that lab is mainly concerned with the psychological study of narrative fiction and like how people relate to fiction, how they relate to characters, and like the parasocial relationships they form with characters. Uh, and other than that, the lab does a lot of like diverse research. I think when I joined it, or like when I was interviewing for that, uh, Dr. Murr, who's the head of the lab, said like, yeah, we might say that we're about like fiction, but we cover pretty much anything you want to do.
Hmm.
Uh, so in that way, they're kind of like they cast a wide net, and my thesis within that lab actually isn't specifically on writing or fiction. It's on news. I'm looking at doom scrolling, which is the like a maladaptive relationship with consuming negative news.
Hmm.
So that's what I've been looking into. I'll be presenting that a lot over the next coming month. Uh, Other than that, of course, I've been working with you guys. I've been working on this VR project. What I've been doing a lot of recently is editing together clips of the research that you did
Hmm.
over the past couple of years into like clips that we can specifically show at conferences.
Absolutely. So three of us are presenting at Computers and Writing 2023, tentatively scheduled for that out in University of California, Davis, so not far from San Francisco. And yeah, what a cool thing to like proposed that we wanted to talk about some of the challenges of writing, and what the themes kind of came up through this sort of experience. And yeah, you really helped us along with editing videos and things like that. So yeah, I'm glad that you're working with Dr. Raymond Marr too. That sounds like a great place to be working with. Now, I just need to grab my questions that I was going to send to you, because one of the things about writing in VR, folks, is, and then let alone streaming as a broadcaster, is you've got to manage like both the physical and coexistent world. But maybe we can just start by talking about like, what are your initial impressions right now of working and setting up in VR? I guess actually, I know that one of the questions I did want to ask you was, can you talk us through what it was like to set up VR for the first time? My impression was this was your first time when we said, "Come pick up a headset from us, set it up." Like, what happened?
It was essentially my first time because my experience with VR before was pretty much like uh, a friend had it, and I tried on the headset once and said, "Oh, whoa, this is so weird."
Hmm.
So I never really considered myself as somebody who would be doing stuff in VR, especially because even though I played video games my whole life, uh, I find that with first-person games, I really easily get simulation sickness. So like when I was, whenever I thought about like trying out VR in more depth, I thought, oh, wouldn't I get sick? Or like, wouldn't my motion sickness trigger? Uh, so like when I came into this experience, I was really cautious of that at first. And I was thinking like, I won't go into anything uh too demanding. And I didn't. But like I could see that as being a barrier for people getting into VR, especially if they haven't grown up with stuff like this, or they haven't grown up with like media in this form. Uh, but yeah, when I picked up the headset, it was a lot easier than I expected. I think something that Dr. C said uh, before, like I really got invested in it, was it might take you a bit to get your VR legs, which I find that really apt because like I never got sick working in VR or anything like I expected to, but there is a level of like unreality to it. Like when you're first trying it out, everything's so unusual. And like after I took off the headset, I'd be like, "Whoa, it feels like I was in a dream."
Exactly.
And of course, I'm much more used to it now. But like, I think that interplay between, uh, like the VR experience itself and yourself being somebody embodied within that is really interesting. And it definitely does take some getting used to.
Right. So you're using the MetaQuest 2 that we loaned you. I mean, right now are you broadcasting from your own like bedroom, or where are you located physically in your like right now?
Yeah, I'm at my desk. It's right over here, and I can bump up against that.
Yeah.
And that's part of embodiment. Like sometimes that's another thing you have to get used to. Sometimes you just like move your leg and kick something, and you didn't realize it was there because you're so immersed in this.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, Beth is very good about typing, while we're in here, and I still struggle with that. Like, I have to see the keyboard in front of me, and like right now, like this is one of the things that we've sort of done a little bit of. I don't think you can. Can you actually see my keyboard right now?
No, I can't.
Okay. So if I face like this way, and then we're getting a little like white out thing that you're sort of seeing. Sorry, folks, but we'll manage. Yeah, that. So yeah, like right now, I have to like kind of reposition myself in order to maybe see this in a better way. Um, let's see if I move over here, I'm like way far away from Hi. Let me try this. Sometimes we get this kind of. Yeah, there we go. So this is what I have to type on, which is you know like a virtual keyboard, but it's basically pecking at things. So if I were to like move up to yours, if I'm looking at the screen and I did enter, that's what I'm going to. Well, Stefan, you can. I've disappeared essentially, right, from this.
You are frozen.
And yeah, you see now it's going black. One of the things about some of the VR is you get these sort of things. You get things when it's totally disappears and doesn't show itself. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can still hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, we ran into a few of those moments in our previous meetings where one of us would just disconnect. We'd completely be cut off from audio, and we'd have to figure out things from there. Pretty much every meeting, I'd say.
Yeah, it's mostly me. I'm not gonna lie. It's usually some kind of thing that, and I think it's funny too. I mean, I'm moving around and you're following me, but like, in a way, like when we collaborate, it different. I don't know. I mean, people are like sort of leaning over each other's desks, and there's things like that. But I don't know if we're sitting this close to each other when we're writing, right?
Hmm.
It's very like um, dimensional,
Yeah, there's definitely like I don't know. At least personally, I don't feel any conception of like personal space that you would otherwise feel,
Hmm.
or like I find that even though it does feel like we're in the same room together, it doesn't feel like we're inhabiting that space, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. It's telling me to adjust my headset now. For you, I mean, once you started setting things up, like what frictions did you encounter at first? That's something we've talked about in class as well. But like, I mean, it's such a I gravitate to that concept a lot, especially with writing in VR, is having to like just continually account for like errors and things like that. But what about you?
Mm. Some frictions I initially ran into. I honestly I didn't run into that much outside of our meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I guess uh one thing was I was having issue with like boundaries being set up. So like
Oh, yeah.
when you start in VR, you have to set a boundary for the room that you can move around in,
Mm-hmm.
or else like if you press up against the edge of it, it'll warn you and
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing. Uh, One issue I found with the Quest early on was when I set a boundary, it wouldn't always stick the next time, and it would like the floor level would change between sessions. So like when I came back to continue whatever I was doing, uh, I'd be like underground within the VR app,
Right.
and I'd have to like wander outside of the environment and reset that. And that's something I don't know if they fixed that. I haven't run into it again, but like that's the thing. Sometimes we just run into random issues.
Unknowns, yeah. The audio being one of them.
Mhm.
Occasionally, as you see my screen flicker, those of us who are watching the stream, uh, it's about the sensors in the room, essentially, you know, um, having a hard time catching it for one reason or another. And so we've like, even done stuff where we've like muted, you know, the lights a little bit, tried to do things like this right now. My hand is moving a bit more, fluidly at this point, but sometimes it doesn't always do that. It flies off into space, whatever else.
Still clipping through your chest, but
It's what?
I said it's still clipping through your chest
Okay,
from my view. But
interesting. I mean, it's funny. I don't really show people that much, but you can actually look at like here. Hi, this is what I look like. In VR. And so yeah, if we kind of see it that way, I give myself purposely a mohawk, but why not? So yeah, I mean, it's all immersed, but that's why they call this one beta because there's challenge like yeah, and we could do fun stuff like throw popcorn at each other and throw it at the screen and stuff like that. So yeah, do we want to demonstrate real quick? Like, can you see this one? This one I'm sharing right now?
do you have a screen up or something?
Yeah,
Because I can't see anything.
yeah.
No, I can't see it.
You can see it. Okay, yeah, and that's the stuff we have to like sort of I think account
Oh,
for.
now I can.
No, oh wait,
And now I can't.
now you can't. Okay, show personal
I
screen.
could for half a second. Let me look at my
Half a
settings.
second. Oh, okay. So what I'll do is show personal screen. That's the one you can see,
There it is.
but the other one you can't.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay. So there's just one that you can't see. Okay. So what I'm going to do is actually drag over the other ones so that we can see what this looks like. Because I trust that this looks fine at this point. So we'll kind of do yeah. How do I want to do this? That's what we have to figure out real quick. We have to figure out how to. Okay, so I shared that one. If I turn this one on though,
I don't see anything.
you don't see anything. Okay, you see it now, right?
Yeah, I can see it on the far wall.
Okay, and then what about this one?
I can't.
Interesting. Okay, so I think what I'll do is just flip flop a little bit and this over here. So yeah,
I also
my
don't want to make it. What's that?
yeah, my browser actually. What I have to do is actually, if you pull it up, we might be able to see it. Do you want to have a
Oh,
go on
sure.
your end?
Uh,
So that's like our back. That's like our monitor essentially, so we can see stuff. But
do you see? Okay, no. I can tell you don't see it because I can see it on the screen, or I can't see it on your screen. Uh,
yeah, you can tell. Yeah, interesting. Show personal screen, and it doesn't do it like that. That's really unfortunate.
yeah, because it was working when I first came in,
It was, yeah,
and
and you can
this
see that.
isn't. Yes, I can.
Okay,
This isn't to like, or I hope this doesn't dissuade people from this altogether, because like we're talking about all the issues we run into. There's also a lot of ways that it's cool, or like there's also a lot of ways that it's kind of helped us with some forms of
Absolutely,
writing.
yeah. And I think that like what it's a good learning off because you can get very discouraged by seeing some of this and being like, whoa, wait a minute, what is this? You know, and why would I even think about doing this if it's already challenging? So what I'll do real quick, this is sometimes what I do in this space is if I misalign like the big screen thing, I can just switch what I'm imaging to folks. Oh, there you go. Did you do that?
Yeah, I put mine on the big screen
Yeah,
beside
there we
you.
go. Okay, so we figured out. So let's go up here because yeah, we'll show people like what the cool part of this is. If you and I are standing right up by here, like the nice thing is we can lay these things side by side and draft and even sit, right? And
Mhm.
do you want to show people like, let's say that we started writing in here and there was a great idea, or something like that. Like, how could we actually mark that up in the virtual worlds? Do you want to show folks the marker
Uh,
if you can find it?
we pull up the it's under toys and tools
Yes, toys
and
and tools.
3D Paint. Yeah, so you could just grab this marker and I gotta close this window ahead of me.
Yeah, if you, I'm not sure it'll let us all the way up there, huh? Like that one bit. Um, Sometimes what we can do is, yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
and mark things up on the screen with this if you wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. Like now with the personal ones like that we've been showing, it's a little easier to do that sort of stuff. Um, but yeah, you could like have an entire whiteboard. You could work that way. You can erase it. Um, there's a lot of creativity you can do there. And then like if I'm in this space, let's see, go back to my personal screen. That sadly you can't see. I'm so sad about that. I'm sorry that that's being annoying too. We'll have to see where it went. You can type together. Do you have your keyboard in
Mhm.
front of you, Stefan?
It is nearby.
Nearby. Yeah, I'll
There it
show
is.
everybody what that looks like for just a second. Okay, so let's say if I'm typing, what I could do is so everybody who can see my webcam as well. Sometimes what I'll do is just like turn up my headset like this, and it's a bit of a cheat, right? I don't think that like this is not the optimal way. It's I didn't learn how to type without looking at my keyboard. But I could go over here and click on this screen. So now like I'm positioned to maybe type and I'm looking in
Hmm.
there. So I can't actually see, but I could say something like, you know, if I have my headset up, this is interesting. And I'm having all kinds of different typos. That's something you captured with some of our projects. There is an option for this that I've tried, and I'll show folks to what this potential is once this stops doing that little thing. You can do a pass through I guess as you sort of said very succinctly, we don't want to discourage anybody from doing writing in VR. But things happen, and maybe I can even just say that was planned. Totally planned, or let's just say anticipated, because I think that like part of this is anticipating what might go wrong when you're working across different platforms and devices and things like that. So it's an unfortunate thing that happens. I might chalk it up to the fact that I was trying to stream on this device, and as well as doing VR, like we've, I think for the most part, we had a good workarounds, with meeting on Discord and chatting. And then if things failed in VR, we still could be connected with each other. That was kind of like, that's kind of been part of our workflow, I think, as researchers.
Yeah, and also streaming is a bit of uncharted territory.
It is, yeah. I mean, trying to set up stuff at home and have like 4 or 5 cameras going while doing this, may not have been the best option. But let's talk about the good, as part of some of this. So you were capturing clips with us. I think we can better show people what it looks like to write in VR if we just, briefly show some of these. So this is like raw footage. Right now, I've got a couple things on my screen that you may be able to see as well. Maybe I can just share that with you so you can kind of follow along in this, and we'll just hope that a crash doesn't happen. I think we'll be okay. But, yeah. So if we look at this, you essentially looked at these clips and started dividing them up into like categories and so forth.
Yeah, like not quantitative, qualitative thematic coding.
Yeah.
And from that, I was kind of able to extract like specific main themes or ideas in them that I took into highlight reels for like each type or each theme. So like I made a reel based on invention, or like when there were clips that seemed to fit that definition, clips where there was some kind of like I guess a non-traditional writing process going on, or like working together, collaborating through VR in a particular way. Do you want the reels themselves? Because I can send that to you.
Oh, we can pull up some of these clips. Yeah, I think just showing it like in real time, and maybe I can pull that up in a minute. But like here is 2 of us talking about invention, and you were able to clip that in a different way. And this is probably a better indication of what it looks like, because like I think we want to save the full clips for like hopefully for publication and stuff like that. But like or the reels. But this is an example of something you had to cut. Let's just look into it real quick.
The idea of like slowness is very interesting to me for this. Like, so I just recommend.
And that's Beth Caravella next to me. We're talking. We've marked up like different packages or passages, things like that.
And like, don't come in thinking you're going to be able to compose a full manuscript unless you really spend the time in it. But if you want to sit and pull up a big thing and take notes together in a very slow way, like you may not get much writing done, but you're still part of the writing process.
Yeah, and it's
I don't know.
Yeah,
That's just
no,
like
for
that's
sure.
like just a very like roundabout way of, I guess, a think out loud, if you will. I don't know where I'm going with that yet, but yeah.
No.
Yeah.
See, and that's actually really funny to me because I actually it's funny that you think of it as being a slowdown because I actually find that it speeds me up a little bit.
Oh, really?
Not yeah, well not necessarily the writing itself. I don't think because I use the actual keyboard that's right here and I don't try to clicky. My writing
That's
pace I think is pretty much the my writing pace stays kind of the same, but because I have so many other things in here, like if I'm typing, I can also just look to the right real quick and write down a note literally in the air next to me. That's just going to sit there and float. And so whereas normally if I was writing at my desk, that would be, okay, I have to pull away, I have to turn away from the laptop screen, I have to find a pencil, I have to find wherever my nearest piece of scrap paper is, and then I have to hope that by the time I need that note, that piece of scrap paper is still visible on my desk. And so for me, my writing process actually gets a little bit more efficient. Just because I can, it's like 360 writing. I can surround myself with all of my ideas all at once.
Yeah, and that might be
360 writing. I forgot about that comment she made. That's really interesting.
Mhm.
Like I don't know if I actually do that in the physical space. Like I don't have things right behind me that I can look at. I've just got what's ever on this desk I'm looking at right now, and that's about it. But like something about taking advantage of every element.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of potential there with uh, stuff beyond what's currently available in big screen. Like you asked me, uh, some or like you asked me if I had a wish list of things that we had in
Yeah.
VR. I was actually looking into it, and one thing I want does exist. Uh, it's just like pretty primitive and it's expensive at the moment. I was thinking of like VR pens. So if you could use like a pen with a tracker and just write notes beside you, because I find using the controllers it's difficult to write a note because we're not like it's not something you really have the muscle memory for. It's not something you're really used to writing using like this big controller in your hand
Mm-hmm.
or like directly like writing down letters.
Mm-hmm.
But if you had some kind of like VR pen, for example, which I know it does exist, there just aren't that many of them, uh, and it was compatible with big screen, that seems like it could be really useful for making notes in that sort of like 360-degree writing context.
Yeah, right. And so I'm not sure you can still see this on the stream, but I'm coming to the Discord. But yeah, VR Inc. is part of Logitech. They're introducing this, and yeah, unfortunately, right now it's just like apply to get it, and they're trying to target mostly engineers and like sort of architects and things like that are modeling and so forth. But I think like eventually, and I hope we could see something that's really compatible with for public use, right? Like this would be huge to have because right now, like I was mentioning to folks earlier on the stream, like I can turn my controller in a different way and try to write by hand, but it's still not possible. It's still kind of like taking it like, I don't know, holding it up like a spray can, so to say, right?
Mhm.
Which fits a lot of different programs, but I think for writers, we still have a long way to go to be able to do
Yeah,
stuff robustly.
absolutely.
Yeah. And what I love about Beth's perspective is it's usually like in contrast to what I bring, and so the fact that like she can write really proficiently in VR without looking at the keyboard is amazing. And I think that's why we complement each other a lot with this project. Just, if we were all sort of like, I think like-minded, it would be challenging. There's a clip. Do you happen to remember where this is under? I was trying to show folks right before we crashed that it was a point when I was trying to do a pass through on the screen and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm bumping into myself." It was something like that. It's probably under technical difficulties. I'm
Mm.
guessing, but um,
I don't know
let me
off the top of my head where that is.
right.
But I did have it in my old technical difficulties reel.
You did right. Yes.
So I can pull that up and send that to you.
Maybe we can do this. I think it was in the new one too. Maybe I can find that real quick. Why don't I just here? Let me put this over so we don't. Um, it's a little sneak preview of hopefully what people can see. Yeah,
Here, I found the timestamp.
you did. Oh, okay, nice.
Uh,
Sounds good.
you could just open that up through Discord.
Okay, let's do this. There it is. Okay, so I'll drag this over so people can see it. There we go. All right, so like what VR allows you to do, and this is a way of remedying sometimes if you need to see your keyboard, is something like this.
Oh, holy smokes, this is weird. Okay, so it's giving me my room view now through my camera, and you're echoing.
Yeah, you are too.
It's like, do you have it coming through your headset or speakers?
Yeah,
No,
I think
it was I
I think
you
I
were
removed
coming
it from
through.
the current technical difficulties reel because I figured it's not really like a technical difficulty per se.
It's more of
It's just
orientation, yeah.
yeah, it's more just being taken aback by what you can do with it.
100%. Yeah, yeah.
Through somehow both my headset and my speakers.
Oh, is that right? Okay. Oh my god.
Okay, Okay, so we won't get too much into the the downsides, but we were trying to stream music and doing some different things like this, and yeah, it was really interesting. In terms of other sort of things like wish lists, I could just offer one. Yeah, I think like maybe having even more gloves and so forth, and being able to write that way with haptics. I think that, like, I'm hearing about more accessibility that way coming out, would be interesting. Because if I can hold it, act like I'm holding even like a virtual pen, like we've got in big screen VR, I think that would be interesting. But when I have to click and hold it as if I'm like holding a gun or something, it's not. I don't know. It just doesn't feel. It doesn't feel like writing to me.
Yeah,
So sad.
that's an even better idea. The idea of some kind of haptic glove.
Yeah, yeah. There's more things like that coming out, and no, that's the one we looked at earlier. Let's see if there's someone in process. But I mean, all that being said, like with some of these difficulties, I don't know. I think there's what I find is just once you've got that set up, and if you're patient with it, it works really well. And I might hazard to say, like, I wish that we could all work on like a meta quest, for example, because that setup might be easier. I think there's sometimes some uncertainties that come along with using three people using three different devices and things like that. But at the same time, it's a welcome challenge to see like how can we, sort of meet in the middle and find a space that works. And for the most part, big screen has worked. We've just had some issues with audio, and it's free too. I mean, once you've got the hardware, that's the big kicker.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'll ask you one more question because you've stayed with us for a little longer, and apologies. I hope I haven't interrupted any of your meetings and stuff today because
Not at all.
you're nearing the end. Oh my gosh, like 3 weeks and you're done. So how do you think like just writing in VR for you personally has shaped your thinking about just creative processes and writings in general?
Well, I find that the thing I've noticed is something you also pointed out in one of the videos, and I think when you mentioned that, it kind of like awakened me to that as well. And then it's that writing in VR really makes more salient the little things you do, or like just the ways that I guess like small independent parts of your workflow that you wouldn't otherwise notice suddenly kind of magnify once you're in VR and you're in this different context and you sort of have this change of scenery. Uh, One way, I guess, for Dr. C was uh, the 360 writing thing, where she would otherwise have to, like grab sticky notes and do that sort of thing. But in VR, she's kind of made aware of this process, this thing that she does. Uh, Personally, for me, this isn't really like a writing. This isn't really like directly a writing thing,
Mm-hmm.
but I noticed very quickly when I was watching back my footage that when I'm just in meetings, I nod a lot, and all of my footage from the first couple meetings, half of it is just unusable because I'm just constantly shaking the camera up and down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not even a writing thing, but it's just something that VR made me notice because of, there's a big camera strapped to my head in this case. Uh, I'd
Yeah.
say I'd say also in terms of writing, I could see it forcing kids to learn like muscle memory for typing on keyboards, that sort
Mm-hmm.
of thing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, I think that um, if you look at like that, I don't even know what we're talking about here. Let's just tune in real quick. Oh, and yeah, see, that's one of the things we saw. Yeah, switching to,
I can barely hear you.
but yeah, like the embodied nature of either like it makes you aware of what your body's doing in virtual and either physical space. Like I think I nod a lot, when I'm in meetings generally, but like something about this is how much am I able to actually nod? I don't know when I'm in the virtual space. I don't know. I think back to the point for me, what it's just made me think is there is a value in slowing down sometimes and like working with um, being kind to myself that I can't write at the speed that I can write in person. So I need to think very carefully about each word and be okay with like typos and things like that and go back and fix it. Um, and I think just also just how much I value collaboration. Like most of my publications at York since I've started have been collaborative, and like this is just one way of dealing with that loss that you get when you can't meet each other that often.
Collaboration is a huge one because, I mean, students all the time, everybody at this point, uh, collaborates through something like Google Docs, where you're all in on one document making changes to it. But VR has the potential to improve that or like enrich that method of collaboration
Mm.
by, as we started off the top of the screen talking about, making it feel like you're in the same room together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I kind of wonder about this too. Is for pedagogy, it's something like we can kind of maybe sort of entertain a little bit later, especially for this project. Is if we're looking at this document right now on the screen, or we were in just a second. So we go back to this. Like, let's go back to one more part. Is I know some researchers were looking at like Google Glass, for example, as a way to give feedback. A buddy of mine, Jason Tam, did some research on that, where he would give feedback, but like from the first person perspective. And I kind of wonder when doing like digital writing reviews or doing anything like just reading up an essay, if I were to come into a class and mark this up for you from the first person perspective, I kind of like wonder how valuable that would be or inaccessible because of like head nods and things like that. Because that assumes you have to have a stationary view, right? But if I'm like going up and marking it and trying to follow along, I kind of wonder what that impact would be like. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to talk further about. And I'm also just really interested in the idea of using this in the future because we don't really have a clue whether or not this will be something that will catch on more, whether it'll ever get less expensive. We can assume it might. But as time goes on, I feel like you'll have more people who already begin with their VR legs, so to speak, like people who have grown up with this current age of technology and are already sort of equipped to use it. I wonder if that would really help kids in like several years down the line, a decade, a couple decades, if like they need to continue doing online
Yeah.
schooling in some sort of way, and VR was way more accessible. If that just becomes the norm, like everybody's used to the affordances of VR, things are kind of refined a bit. I could totally imagine that being a thing, like
Yeah.
people write in VR at that point.
Yeah, we like without much error. It's an efficient, streamlined way of doing it. Like, and maybe it's when it's not as sort of hardware dependent, it might be easier. But like, I'm just looking at this now, and I wonder, maybe I have to try this for like one person or something for my class if they're into it. Is to sit like and watch their videos that they're composing for classes with like virtual popcorn and like make my comments that way. I don't know. It's like you've created this environment for them to join. Or holding like a screening and a workshop while we look at a giant text like this and talk with 10 to 15 people. I haven't entered that space yet. I've just done the writing because I mean I think I've got some legs with with VR and writing in it, but I still think like I have a long way to go with making it really really usable and so forth.
And the main barrier in the first place, I'd say, is just that it's expensive.
Yeah.
If you didn't have that, I think this would already be a lot more popular. I think you would have, instead of Zoom being the big thing, maybe we would have seen VR classrooms be a normal thing during the height of the pandemic.
Yes, like, and I would love to see that. There's a whole area of VR in education. I think we've been trying to do that, but that's a lot of headsets, a lot of processing power, a lot of bandwidth to get people connected to.
And
So,
a lot of opportunity for things to go wrong at the moment.
yeah, right. So in and of itself, let this stream be its own kind of pedagogy, right? To say like we are having errors and all that sort of stuff. I think that being mindful of those, but trusting that eventually you get to a space where you can do some really neat stuff. And I think our footage that we've captured, you know, hopefully should assure viewers it is possible. It's definitely possible. We've been doing it for a long time, but yeah, stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Stefan, this has been great. I'm so glad you could join us, and thanks for your patience to you and to everybody else for hanging out while we configured and showed everybody the ins and outs of doing some of this. So I'll go ahead and sign you off. That's okay, and then make some comments wrapped up on the stream. But
Yep. Thanks, Rick.
yeah, looking forward to having you more for the rest of the term and seeing you at Computers and Writing and stuff like that. So you can look out for our publications, everybody that is, further down the line. We've got some stuff to tell you about tomorrow, by the way.
Awesome.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good day.
You too.
All right, folks. So that's all I've got for today's stream. Yeah, it was a little interesting there, so to say, how we did that. But again, a lot of value in just showing you all, what's at stake when you try to do this. All right, so just want to end it with a couple comments on what's coming up. And next week, we're speaking with Dr. Chris Morris about writing and intervening in a conversation on composing lit reviews. And also just a way to kind of build some attention to his anti-racist writing workshop, which is happening later next week as well. After that, we'll be talking on the 29th about writing as and presenting and what that looks like. In fact, sometimes Stefan, Dr. C, and I have talked about presenting talks through VR with like a stationary camera or something like that. And what you'll continue hearing about this in terms of VR is it's very experimental. There's a lot you can experiment with. The only way you're going to know what to do and to optimize the situation is to experiment and to kind of work with that uncertainty. And then we finally have writing as and composing yourself. So for each one of those, we'll have special guests, just like we had today and just like we had last week and the week before. So you can expect all of those different things. They'll always be on demand. For example, writing as in revising is online now. Thanks to May Mac for helping along with that and for the comment about the music. Sorry about that earlier. But until then, we'll be back next week to talk a lot more about all things writing, whether it's virtual or not, but particularly about literature reviews. So that's all I have, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much. Bye.